Okay, good morning, everyone. Today we will have our session hosted by Associate Professor Pamela Nichols. She is the head of the WITS writing program. Her PhD is in comparative literature at New York University. Uh, she will be providing a session on writing as thinking for our theme this month of academic literacy. So I will be handing it over to Pam now. Thank you, Pam, for joining us today.
Um, Welcome and welcome to everyone. Please do me a favor and be as interactive as possible, because I was actually expecting this to be an in-person event, but I'll do my best with the journal. And please interrupt and ask, and actually I'm going to ask you to write a little bit as well. And so I hope you're warm and able to write. So first of all, to tell you about the writing program, our biggest premise is that writing is thinking and writing as thinking. And that's huge because it means it's no longer about grammar or a particular language, but it's about thinking through what you mean and being able to communicate it effectively within disciplines. So my job is not to be a writing expert and to look at transitions so much as to help people within disciplines surface the ways that they want students to think. And that's, if you ask accountancy, they'll say, oh, that students need to be critical and argue. You push them a bit further and they start talking about students needing to read a text in terms of certain categories. So this is where it gets very, very interesting. And we work out what it means to think, to find out what you think, and then to communicate that thinking within particular disciplines. And of course, you are the people who know how to think as a medical practitioner and how you need your students to learn to think within the field and to use writing to further your thought so that they use writing to think and find out what they don't know, and then they get to the documents that will have actions within your particular discipline. Adriana, I hear that you can't hear anything. My mic is on. Arshad, is there a problem with sound?
Not on my end. So I can hear you perfectly.
I
All
can
right.
hear.
Sorry, Adrian. um, I'll keep going, but I hope you can hear a bit better now. So the WITS writing program is a program of now 50 writing intensive courses, which are courses that have been adapted to use writing to deliver course content. It also comprises the WITS Writing Centre, which is a free resource for all WITS students and staff, a place with a writing library. We also have writing groups now, which are postgraduates who meet regularly, share their work with each other, teach each other. And the fourth branch of the WITS writing program is more public facing. So we have a festival, we have events for the community, that sort of thing. What we're aiming for is to promote a culture of writing where people are using writing to think. And I think in health sciences, because so many of your students are keen on covering material, this might be something that has been missed a little bit. The use of writing to understand, the use of writing to think, the use of writing to communicate within disciplines and be explicit about how you want to communicate. So what we're looking at today is academic writing as thesis-based writing. So whatever discipline it is, it's nearly always about types of arguments. So I'm going to give you some very, I think, useful ways of understanding academic writing as argument and as situated argument. Would you all be willing to try a very short little frame sentence, a frame sentence? Please say yes. Someone. I'll yes, good. There we are. I'm going to show you from the journal an example, and then I'm going to ask everyone to take 5 or 10 minutes, no more. I think it might actually be easier for you as medical practitioners to write this sentence because your logic might be clearer. If we share the Creative Academic Writing Journal, which has been given to you, can you see it? I can't see it. Let's check.
Not yet.
All right, let's try again. It's not sharing on my screen. That's strange.
It doesn't appear to be sharing, but I have attached the journal in the chat.
I would like to have it on the screen so people can see. I don't know why it's not doing that. So I'm saying share, but I don't see it. Well, I'll give you the first example. And Ashad, maybe you could share your screen to the Creative Academic Journal.
JL, would you be able to share it?
Are you? Yes, there we go. Excellent. Thank you very much. So let's go the pages to, and this is what's in there. So you see there's quite a lot of information in there that you can use later on argument, language of qualification. Go a bit further ahead, Ashad, and stop there. But back a bit, stop. So this sentence, I'll put it also in the chat. It's a very useful focusing sentence. I am studying, and I want you to think of your current writing project. It's a very nice way of explaining how we can help students focus their argument and their writing through this progressive lens. I am studying, and then exactly what you're studying. And if you don't mind, if you all try this, I am studying exactly what you're looking at the moment in order to see or find out what you want, the questions you're asking. Third level, so that my readers can see the significance of. So, for example, that first one, let's look at example 2. It's probably sharper. I am studying the written accounts of 3 US writing teachers of their experiences teaching in South Africa in the 1980s. So I am studying exactly what I'm looking at. What am I asking? What am I trying to find out? In order to find out if they had similar experiences in the classroom in reaction to their pedagogy. Third level, so that my reader can consider if the revealed micropolitics in these accounts of writing classrooms suggest legacies which might still be present. Can everyone have a go now at trying that sentence for yourselves? Ashad, could you go up a bit? That's right, back a bit, and we'll just look at the first example. That's it. Another one. This one is less focused because it was something I haven't finished yet. That second one was a published article. I'm studying exactly what I'm looking at in order to see which voices and what I want to find out so that my readers can see the significance of or can see something of and how these perceptions of others leave traces and form unlikely symmetrical patterns. So let's take just 5 minutes. Think of your current writing project and write down, I am studying, and then exactly what you're looking at in order to find out how or why, and then fill that in so that my readers can see the significance of. Please, everyone, try this. Just try it. And we'll hear some of them. You can write them in the chat if you like. That would be good. But just have a go at trying this because I want you to I want to then explain how these 3 levels help us to understand shapes of argument. All right, so thumbs up for everyone. Well, I hope so. Good. Yes, a thumbs up. Thank you. Thank you. There's life. Right. So we'll take till 12:15. Have a go at just filling in that sentence. And if you're brave, put the sentence in the chat. Otherwise, I will ask you. Very good. Right. Let's Simone, Tabitha, Stuart, and Anne. Could you read yours aloud, and then we'll pick on a couple of other people as well. Simone.
Sure. Uh, I'm studying the visual representation of the breast in South African history in order to find out how or why the breast is viewed as such an over-sexualized object in inverted commas, so that my reader can see the significance of changing times and viewing the breast in a more holistic way.
Great. Fascinating. Any questions for anybody on that one?
No.
All right. Yes. Do I hear Adrian?
I'm so sorry. My mic was on accidentally.
That's all right.
Sorry.
I wonder if you could, in the classroom, I'd ask you to clap. But so do send claps and thumbs up when we hear these. And that, what I'd liked about all the ones in the chat is that there's a very nice, clear logic. Excellent. So clap for Simone. Yay, right. Thank you. Tabitha.
Okay, I'm studying the prevalence of genetic variants in women meeting certain criteria in order to see how these criteria compare to those used in other countries in terms of their predictive value, so that I can make recommendations as to the usefulness of these criteria.
Yes. You see, actually, you in the health sciences and sciences have advantages over humanities in that I think you can do this exercise very nicely because there's a very clear logic there, which is very nice for the reader. Stuart, claps for Tabitha. Yay, claps. Thank you. Thank you. And Stuart.
Hi, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
So I'm studying the experiences of our newly graduated doctors in order to find out why they find the transition from student to doctor so challenging, so that my reader can see the significance of curriculum innovation that improves preparedness for practice.
Perfect. Yes, lovely. Claps. Very good. And Anne. Good.
I'm studying the experience of my students in a near-peer environment in order to find out how it affects their transition into practice so that my reader can see the significance of incorporating near-peer teaching as a pedagogy.
Excellent. And shall we pick on somebody else? Clap, clap, clap. Anyone else want to go? Any brave person who's also there? What's a wonderful way of teaching writing and developing a culture of writing is to work on your own writing with peers. So that's why we are more and more stressing writing groups, and they can be for staff, for students, and it's a way of meeting with colleagues regularly. Because already we see that Stuart and Anne, I don't know if you do share each other's work, but they presumably your work would inform each other. But in general, I think it's very, very useful to have some friends, 2, 3, 4 people. You meet regularly, you write together, you share each other's work, and you're thinking through your work. Your ideas are getting clearer. You're supporting each other as you submit journal articles. Writing groups are great. It's a sort of, all right, that's a good idea then. So you're already close together. That's perfect. But writing groups are the best ways to be writing facilitators because you're doing the work yourselves. Just to tell you another premise, that we're working with writing as thinking, but we're also working with a premise that everyone can write better, and that when you have a workshop, nobody's the expert, that we're all working on the craft of writing. And, some days we write rubbish, sometimes days we write good things. What you did just then, I'm very grateful that you did it so well, is that actually, those are quite polished sentences, but using informal writing to push yourself further along before you get to the formal writing, so that writing isn't this sort of scary English, has to sound good thing, but it's rather your tool to think, to make your ideas real, to play with ideas, to make mistakes, to think about it, to be distanced from it, and then to get better and better and find your thinking. That's why this journal is called Creative Academic Writing, because if academic writing isn't creative, if it's not involving imagination, it's going to be pretty dull and predictable. So we are trying to use writing to help us to think further. Arshad, can we go to page 17, which is the triangle? Yep. And this, I hope you might find this useful. It's very good, very good. There we go, stop. And I don't know if you've seen this before, but one definition of academic writing is the art of reasoned discourse employed by someone to convince others of something. So what are the three elements in that definition for a successful piece of academic writing or a successful argument? The art of reasoned discourse employed by someone to convince others of something. Someone tell me, or I pick on some poor person. Stuart. Stuart, are you on?
Yes,
Yes,
sorry,
great.
I'm back.
That's fine, don't worry.
I just caught the end there.
If in that definition, what are the three elements that need to be there for a successful argument? The art of reasoned discourse, employed by someone to convince others of something. What are the three elements there?
So I think, so it says you need to find
the three elements in that definition. The art of reasoned discourse, employed by someone to convince others of something.
So I think the three elements is A, the audience, B, the idea that you're trying to persuade, and then the other element is your ability to convey that idea.
Perfect. So the art of reasoned discourse is the first one. That's the argument. Employed by someone, that's the writer, to convince others, the audience, of something. And that's Aristotle's rhetorical triangle. And it's useful because it makes you realize that writing is action. If we're successful, we're getting something into somebody else's head. And we need those three elements: the art of reasoned discourse, which is the logos, employed by someone, the ethos, to engage the art of reasoned discourse employed by someone to convince others of something, and that's the pathos. Logos at one head of the triangle, ethos at one foot, pathos at the other. So logos is the logic, the argument, the thing that you're studying, claims, reasons, and evidence why it might be true. Ethos is the implied credibility of the writer in the text. Who is the implied writer, and do we trust them on this subject? Pathos, have you engaged the values, beliefs, and principles of your particular audience? So that's why this sentence, which you all tried, is very useful. Exactly, Grant. Because, no, not Grant, Adrian, sorry. But yes, and that's what, in fact, I often use this one, that there's, I forget his name, is in a biochemist, but he failed to get an NRF application because he hadn't done spell check. So his ethos failed. So you need all three of those. You need a really good argument. You need to sound right on paper, that we trust you. You've done spell check, for example, and you need to get through to that particular audience. So this triangle works anywhere, and it's different everywhere. You have different audiences, you have different ways that you have to engage them, the different voices that you need, and sometimes you might have different ways of arguing. That sentence, I am studying logos in order to find out how or why, your interest as a researcher, ethos, pathos, the engagement of the values, beliefs of your audience, why your particular readers are going to find what you're doing significant. So I think that's a very useful triangle, and it's useful to show students so that they realize that all writing is situated. It's from a particular moment in time, trying from a particular writer, trying to convince others using a particular argument. It's also good in terms of fake news, because that rhetorical triangle makes you realize all the time who is writing this and why, what is the logic, who is the audience they're geared for. We need more rhetorical savviness in order to navigate this very, very manipulated world that we're in. So that was one thing I wanted to give you today, because of course it's going to be very, very short. That, I think, very useful triangle which you can relate to that sentence, which I think works in all disciplines. And the people who put their sentences in the chat, those are really excellent sentences. You've got the logic beautifully. Something else I wanted to show you was the research cycle. So we're doing a triangle and a circle today. And then after that, I can show you a little bit of what is also in this journal, and we can have about 15 minutes for any questions, comments, or discussions that you have and things that you would like to know more about. So Arshad, can we go back now, I'm afraid, to page 13 and the research circle? That's it. Up a bit, stop there. Up a bit, so we've got the above the chains, further up. No, other way, sorry. Down, I meant, sorry. Stop that, perfect. So this circle is very useful because many times students want to just solve something, do something, and that's not scholarly. Scholarly work or academic work is looking for the gap in knowledge. So you see this nice little circle. You have a practical problem. There's something you want to understand. That motivates you towards your research questions. I'm going to go back to it here as well. There we go. Good. That motivates your research question, which if you push that circle further, working out where there is a gap in knowledge, leads you to the research problem, which is the bigger intellectual issue. And that's often what students don't do. They go practical problem, research question, research answer. However, we've got to push that circle to the gap in knowledge, to the more interesting intellectual area that we need to understand, which gives us an answer, which then goes back to that practical problem, which either to solve it or gives us some applied pure knowledge. So that circle, if you go down a little bit, Arshad, thank you. Example 1 and example 2. Let's get example 1 and 2 in the screen. So example 2 goes on to page 15. Up a little bit. Perfect, but down a bit. Perfect. So thinking it's hard to do this, but it is quite useful. How does the chief in Mahikeng function in contemporary South Africa? That was the practical problem. The research questions, how do traditional leaders cooperate with municipal and national structures in political crisis community development? Push that circle a bit further. How do traditional leaders function in contemporary South Africa? That's the intellectual problem. And his answer was that they successfully integrate with a modern bureaucratic state and offer additional benefits such as low-level democratic participation and development management. Second one, and I was trying to work on that article mentioned earlier, what the practical problem is, what do the written records of these 3 US writing teachers who taught in South Africa in the 1980s suggest about the micropolitics of the South African writing classroom? Research question, do their books on their experiences record significant commonalities or differences in the challenges and resistances to their pedagogy, read through identifying their representation of what is real, good, and possible, which is a way of identifying ideology in the classroom, of what is represented as real, good, and possible, compared to the assumptions implicit in their South African context, teaching context. So the research problem, making it a bit bigger, what were the revealed micropolitics of the South African writing classroom as represented in these records? The answer, similar resistances to the same pedagogical methods and philosophies, so describing specific resistances to a democratic pedagogy which might still be present. Can we move down the page a bit, Arshad? Good. Right, so, and now you'll need your mics on. I'm going to tell you a story, and I want you to see if you can identify on that circle what is the practical problem, what is the research for practical problem, what is the research question, what is the research problem, that larger intellectual issue that needs to be solved, what is the research answer, and don't go too fast. So the example comes from Plato's The Republic, book 1, and it's the opening narrative to The Republic. And I want you to tell me, I'll tell you the story, and I want you to tell me what is the practical problem that Socrates faced, what is his research question, what is his research problem? Right. So what happened was last weekend, Socrates and his philosopher buddies were in Athens at the carnival. They're not, they're weedy little philosophers. They wanted to go to bed early, so they left, were trying to leave the carnival and leave Athens. As they tried to leave, up popped Polemarchus and pulled on Socrates' toga and said, "You're not going anywhere. My master wishes to speak to you." Socrates says, "But can't you tell we're already on our way out? We don't want to go." And Polemarchus says, "You're not going anywhere because I've got 10 very strong men behind me, and we want you to stay and we want you to go to our master." And then Socrates says, "May there not be an alternative? May we not persuade you to let us go?" "How can you persuade us," says Polemarchus, "if we refuse to listen?" Right. So, without going too fast, what is the practical problem which Socrates and his philosopher weedy friends face? Brave person, unmute and speak. Otherwise, I pick on some poor person. Mm. Ah, good, patience. I can't hear you, patience. Can other people?
No, I can't hear.
I can hear somebody now. Is that patience?
No, it's me saying I can't hear patience.
All right. Who would like to have a go? Go on, be a brave person. Is it patience speaking? Probably. Oh dear.
This is Adrian.
Right, go for it, Adrian.
Well, obviously they needed to find out how they can go home without
Perfect.
following the requests for the gods or whatever. So
Right, so
the problem.
don't go too fast, Adrian.
Okay.
So the practical problem is, how do we go home? What's the research question? What's the obstacle to going home?
Getting past the gods.
Getting past the guards. Perfect. That's it, getting past the guards. So what then is the research problem, the intellectual problem?
How to overcome obstacles.
What type of obstacles?
People. People that are higher than you, people that are in charge.
Yeah. So the research problem is how to use reason over force.
Okay.
Good. I hope that, I don't know, I can hear you. Sometimes people suddenly go, ah, at that. Because it's rather beautiful. It's how do we go home? How do we get past the bully boys? And then the research problem, the intellectual problem, is how do we use reason over force? And that's the research problem, the really interesting problem. And the answer to that is the Republic, understood as the first book of politics, understood as a discipline of reason over force. So I like that. And you see, I think that helps us explain to students what academics is, that it's you want to find out something, you have to work out the questions you need to ask, and then you move into the larger intellectual problem that you have to explore, the gap in knowledge, and then you get your answer. So academics is never just solving a problem, it's working out what you need to know in order to solve that problem, where the gap in knowledge is. Right. Then can we go slowly through the rest of the journal, Arshad, just so I can show people what's there? Thank you. If you keep going, very good. So there is our definition of argument. Keep going. Go further. Logos, ethos, pesos. Keep going. That's very good. That's a classical argument shape. Stop. Stop there. That's perfect. Stop there. So there are patterns there for students. So the classical argument shape bears in mind other arguments. So you have an introduction, you present your case, you summarize opposing views, you respond to other opposing views, you synthesize. So the students always have this sense of creating arguments and argument shapes. This little diagram here comes from this book, which is an excellent book. If you ever come to the Writing Centre in Wartenweiler, I would even maybe possibly give you a copy. We certainly have copies there available. And this other book I've got here is a great book for teaching. If people haven't seen it already, it's wonderful. And both of these, I think, are completely about what other people would call academic literacy, because it's thinking clearly, it's using logic, it's engaging students to use writing to think and to use writing as action. This little diagram here is wonderful, helping students to think through shapes of argument. And I developed an exercise from this, which has a silly story. I was asked to go a long while ago to Kahiso Securities, and I thought they were bodyguards. And then when I found out that they were high finance people, I thought that was funny. I went and I was asked to work with some of their researchers, and I was told their English wasn't very good. It was nothing to do with their English. What they had to do was to tell clients whether they should buy or sell in a brief, short page. This method, you can use papers, work out what your claim is, sell so-and-so shares, and then think of all the various reasons, as you see in that diagram, why you should sell those shares, and then have evidence for each reason. What's the difference between reason and evidence, Tabitha?
Reason is just off the top of your head, and evidence is something that proves it to be true. Good.
So your arguments will be everywhere. And in a complicated research, you'll have nested arguments, but the sort of backbone of any argument is claim, reason, and evidence. And I often think this is true because of the various reasons, and each reason is linked to evidence. So the evidence, of course, is what your particular readers will find plausible and as good evidence. The reasoning is your thinking. And you'd be surprised how many people write papers with claims and evidence and don't show their thinking, or they write claims and lots of reasons and no evidence. Getting the students to do these sorts of diagrams, because that's what I did with these researchers, on their tables and in groups, because that's quite useful. If they're in groups, they can talk to one another. They make a claim. They put down various reasons on other bits of paper why this is true. Because it's on bits of paper, you can play with a priority. So you can put the most important one, the most recent one, the least complicated one, whatever your priority is according to your audience, and then evidence for each one. So you could map out a whole shape of an argument that way. So with these researchers, I got their manager, Arnold Verbeloff, to come, and the researchers did small little diagrams. Arnold did this huge, great big one, and then he explained it to them. And through explaining his argument, he made his argument clear, they understood, and there was no problem with their writing. So this might be something you can use with your students. It's great, actually, if you're a supervisor, because instead of reading 100 pages, sometimes you can just play with these argument shapes and see where there might be issues. Arshad, can we go down a bit further? So just show people what else is in here. All right, so there's an example of above. Can we go up a bit? Yeah, up a bit, page 20, stop. Yes. All right. So that's a simple way, claim, reasons, and evidence, not using the cards. And we'll go down a bit. Keep going down, if you don't mind, Arshad. I'm sorry to ask you to do this, but glad that you are. So this one is another way of breaking down argument and giving a vocabulary for argument. We don't have time to do this now, but I think this one is useful too. So Stephen Toulmin was a legal philosopher. So this is understanding argument, not in terms of pure philosophical argument, but in terms of something that's reasonable to a group of people at a particular time, something that works for a jury. So his way of breaking down argument was to claim and then support, which includes reasons and evidence, and then warrant, which is the glue that allows you to use that support for that claim. It's the guarantee. So warrants are quite fascinating. And very varied and very difficult. Claims can be different types of claims, and there are and the support will include reason and evidence. So if we were doing this type of workshop, which we don't have time at the moment, I'd work first of all in helping you to identify whether you're making a claim of fact, a claim of value, or a claim of policy. And the reason for doing that is that you can structure your argument differently according to what type of claim it was. But let's go through that. Go further down, Arshad, if you don't mind. And thank you so much for doing this. Sorry about that. Keep going down. So there's an exercise on that. And then warrants. Keep going down. Keep going down. So warrants, fascinating warrants. So you've got warrants based on experience, authority, systems of knowledge and belief, cultural warrants, and that warrants are often invisible. So we won't be doing this now, but later on, if any of you are interested, we could, or you could read this slowly. Keep going, Arshad, because I'm just going to give people an overview of what's in here. This is much, once you've done that hard work, you get a simple thing. Right, stop here. Right, language of qualification. Actually, let's keep going down. Stop there, Arshad. Great. This is very nice to give students that good argument, good academic argument is qualified. So we're teaching them argument, but we're also teaching them qualification. So when they're incorporating opposing views, you can give them these sorts of frame sentences. Despite what so-and-so says, nevertheless something, even though it is these sorts of language of qualification, I think, is useful in helping students become more reasonable. Now, the rest of the journal is about revision. So keep going down, Arshad. Stop there. Stop up a bit. When it gets to the top of revisions, stop there. So this is another thing to tell you about writing theory that's useful, is that when we're generating our articles, texts, or whatever, first of all, we have to make it make sense to ourselves. And that's writer-based writing. Once we've got the full draft and we know what we're doing, then we do the difficult thing of trying to work out how we're being read, and that's reader-based writing. But if you go straight to reader-based writing, you're probably not going to develop your thinking in the most creative and innovative way. You're going to be playing safe, actually, or scared. Much better, I think, is to encourage students to first of all work out what they think, push the boundaries, don't be boring, really explore, think hard, do that writer-based writing. And when they get to revision, which of course they must leave a lot of time for, otherwise they're going to not have very good writing, then they get into the reader's head and try and think how the reader would read their writing. That's why writing groups are very good, because you've got an audience there who's telling you what they think, what they read, and you've got a better perspective on your own work. You don't need to follow everybody's example. Nobody there is your teacher, but you're able to see and hear how your work might be communicating or not communicating. You also have that distance from yourself. So in revision, I suggest revision in terms of argument and in terms of style. Now, in terms of argument, you think about how your readers would read your argument. Those of us here who have to mark PhDs and MAs, virtually always it's in terms of argument. And introductions, conclusions, that's often something that revises, particularly if you're on the writing part. And this is a very nice way to revise it. Instead of saying, in this paper, I will, that's very boring. Think of it as a conversation with somebody where you're establishing common ground, then showing a disrupting problem, which may have costs to pay if you ignore it, or benefits if you do address it, and then show the way forward. Common ground, disrupting problem, way forward. You'll be surprised how following that pattern can make an introduction much more interesting. And actually, it's in virtually every introduction you'll ever read. So keep going down, Arshad. So that's a way of keep going down. There's an example from that same article I wrote. Revision of argument, thinking like a reader. We'll carry on going down at about that speed. Great. And this is ways to revise your argument, imagining alternatives, deciding what to acknowledge questions you can't answer, frame your responses as support. All these sorts of things are a way of rethinking your argument. And I love that language of acknowledgement and response, highly useful. And there's in that footnote there in blue, that's a very nice thing to give students. It's a worksheet of these sorts of this sort of language to make things reasonable. Keep going, predictable disagreements, and so on. Carry on, Rashad. Very good. Style. Stop there. So had a student from APES who'd passed her master's, but again, the question was that the response from her readers was that her English isn't very good. I looked at it, and it wasn't that her English wasn't very good. It was that it was hard to read. And so I wrote this one for her. I didn't have time to go through it. She went through it and she revised and she did fine, because often revising for style is thinking with the reader about how to make your thinking easier to swallow. So we go through, so sentences with strong subjects. Go down slowly if you don't mind, Arshad. Keep going. Having strong doers and actions. So you've got lots of examples here. Carry on, Arshad. Crucial actions as verbs. Carry on. Carry on. Avoid excessive abstraction. So you've got examples here. Main characters for each sentence, etc. Old before new, that's a highly useful one. Something that people already know, you put first, and then you move towards the new things. You don't put the new thing right at the beginning of the sentence. Active or passive, depending on your meaning. Carry on. Complexity last, very useful one, probably good for medics. In fact, the example is from medics, that you begin with something that's easy to understand and you put the hard thing to understand at the end of the sentence. Carry on. Okay. All right. And then carry on. And then you'll see right at the end of this, there are some links to various things that might be helpful. So I think I'll stop there. Right, very good. So we can, any comments or thoughts, please? We have about 11 minutes left. And also, what are your concerns with your students writing your own writing? Or something from, I think I'm just going to ask everybody if nobody speaks up.
I could maybe just, this is Stuart here.
Yes, Stuart, yes.
So it's actually something I've noticed, and something that came from earlier when we were thinking about the real world problem, the research question, the research problem, is in the health sciences. I've noticed a lot where people are quite orientated towards research methodology and don't spend a lot of time really thinking about, and I think with regards to writing is writing about a clear conceptualization of what the research question and research problem are.
Yes.
And then the style of writing, when it comes to, I think people are still stuck in this idea of doing a literature review instead of putting forward a sort of a genuine argument about why this research problem matters and why this is going to be useful and meaningful research to do. And I find that people are quite comfortable with methodology, but actually struggle with getting across to the reader why this research matters. And it's maybe something that needs a lot of focus on, and maybe something we don't focus on enough.
Good. No, I think both observations are very important, because why are we reading something? There's got to be a point, and we need to get people to think through their reason for writing something and that conceptualization, and to realize that conceptualization is part of the writing, not just getting onto the method, but thinking. If they're not thinking, if they haven't framed it properly, why should we read it? And the style, the thought that a literature review should be an argument. You can't sort of list things. It's got to be organized. It's got to be organized by an argument. So yes, I do think that's massively important. And I don't know how people think in health sciences, but surely they've also got to put things together and make arguments, and because that's how we understand, is how we put things together. I had once an anesthetologist come to the writing center, and she had to write an article for a journal. She hadn't studied at Wits, but she'd never written. I mean, she was a smart woman, but she seemed to have got her degree and qualifications through multiple choice. And so telling her about topic sentences and speaking about arguments and things like that was new to her, and she learned very, very quickly. But I was horrified that she'd got that far without ever having to put her thoughts together. But yeah.
We do so little writing.
Yes.
So the story doesn't surprise me, but it would be lovely if that situation would change.
Can it change? I mean, maybe it's a different way of valuing things. I don't know. Because I think if you're not writing, you're not putting your thoughts together. I mean, it depends what counts as writing, but you have to find ways to think through problems, not just through ticking boxes or whatever it is. I don't know. Maybe that's your challenge. Yes, Anne.
I found another challenge. So for me, I've did my PhD. I was very proud of it, right? And then I started doing different courses, a postgraduate diploma in health sciences education, now a master's. And I realized, and then sometimes I look at the PhD and I question, how did I pass this? Because when I did it then, it was kind of just like your discussion is around, okay, this is what I found, and I found other studies to compare it. But now what I've been learning is my voice, like finding my voice. So just because a paper says something, it doesn't necessarily mean that's the only one. So do I necessarily agree with that? And I'm learning the value of interrogating what I'm reading.
Yes.
So it's not that paper said, but does it make sense to me? And why do I think even this could be supported? Why? So can I find another study that supports my thoughts around this study? And I'm allowed to bring in my voice because it's at the end of the day my work. And I think I didn't find encouragement for my voice until now. And really like that voice is that argument. And one of the things I often find in my profession, which is very concerning, is as pharmacists, we're like the custodians of medicine.
Yes.
But there are so many pharmacists that'll pick up issues with scripts and then just leave it because they don't want to argue with the prescriber. But I'm just like, and I'm starting to realize it's because you cannot argue medicine. They struggle to argue medicine. That ability to argue for something and bring in one's own voice and argue with it with evidence, but using the own voice is very, very lacking. And I've seen it in my department. Now that I'm aware of it, I see that deficiency within our curriculum, within our teaching of students. But that bringing in one's own voice, interrogating what you read, is like the thing that needs to be brought. Like I'm finding out is a challenge for me to bring in and start encouraging in my students.
Amen. And that's this thing. It's all about engagement. And speaking as a potential patient, I mean, my God, I would want the pharmacist to notify if a script was wrong or something like that. And we need, and I liked what you said about voice being argument, because that's exactly what I think too. I'm not into, voices in my heart and here it is. That's my voice is how we frame what we write. So voice, and that's the argument. Voice is our craft, what we choose to say, how we put it together. And absolutely. And what you're saying about reading, massively important. You only write as well as you can read. And we've got a global crisis of reading that because of social media, internet, and just pressing things and skimming, we're not reading. And if you're not reading, then you're not thinking, because you're not reading deeply. You're not understanding as much as you can about who wrote what and why, sort of having a web of meaning here and how this relates. If you're not reading deeply, you are easily manipulated. And we see how that's happening all over the world. This is how the authoritarian leaders come to power, because they use massive propaganda machines and bots and heaven knows what. We've got to start reading more deeply.
We've got to interrogate what we're reading. We've got to apply that discourse analysis.
Yes. So argument is everywhere. That's why this is a theme for this. That's argument is how we understand, and then giving students, I like giving students vocabulary, like the claim, reasons, and evidence. And if we'd done the Toolman, it would have been claim, support, and warrant. And then practicing constructing arguments. So you get better and better at it. And then thinking how other people argue. So everything then becomes situated thought in relation to one another, with the overarching value of trying to be reasonable, because we're not politicians or religious people. We're just trying to find out what is a reasonable, qualified position at the moment in relation to everything. But absolutely crucial. Any more thoughts from anyone? It would, if you have, I know nobody has time, but I do recommend writing groups for your students or for yourselves, because that's what we need really, so that it makes everything more practical, that we're regularly, a writing group, you can sometimes write for 10 minutes together and then somebody presents part of their work. But this whole business of using writing regularly as your tool to think, to produce as part of our daily life, I think is the best way forward. That also gets out of AI, because then you don't want somebody else to speak for you. You want to say what you think, because it's your action. Right, there we are. Oh, the last, Arshad is getting, I think you're getting curious, Arshad. The last one, see, this is one I mainly used for humanities, and this is a really interesting article about who can write about whom. This is from a friend of mine, Kai Miller, who, and the quote is from Kamu Braithwaite, but the article is written by Kai Miller, and he's a poet from Trinidad, and he won a huge prize. And then his lecture for receiving this prize was to talk about who can write about whom in terms of writing about the West Indies. And this lecture was then hugely controversial. It was taken off the website. There was all sorts of newspaper articles in The Guardian in the UK, because he was writing about his white women friends who were from Trinidad and wrote. And anyway, it's I think a really, really beautiful little extract, if you're interested in reading it, about who can write about whom and the complexities of it. We have about 2 minutes left, so I'm just going to pick on a few poor people to say any thoughts they have in their head at the moment about what we're doing, or what they're going to take away from this session. Jitendra, what are you going to take away from this session?
Well, it's given me some direction on how to do this. So this is the first session that I'm actually attending. I need to actually go in, look at all the other recordings, so I can bring myself up to speed on really what's going on. Yeah.
Well, Shira told me that all these sessions are only teasers, and I think that's right. They're just teasers. But if you can find something in any of these materials that you can use, that's the idea. That I think that's for all of us. That everyone's busy, but is there a strategy here that you could use? Kennedy, yes, Jitendra?
Yes, no, it actually has given me some sort of direction and focus as to what I should do. Thank you.
You're welcome. Kennedy, anything you'd like to?
Well, I think
anything to take away, or
yeah, I've benefited quite a lot in terms of takeaways. A couple. One of them was just giving students that ability to free write. I think what you mentioned about where is it now? It was writer-based writing versus the reader-based writing. I think that struck a chord, because I was with some students yesterday and we were trying to get some writing done, and they were trying to write in a way that they were trying to get me to be happy with their writing, and so they were stuck until I tried to say, okay, look, just write whatever you feel, and then we'll polish it.
Excellent.
And that sort of eased the pressure.
Very good.
So that was good to get that back up and get an understanding of exactly what was happening there.
Wonderful. I just want to ask you, because next week I'm going to be in this session next week, and what I thought I'd do is look at writing intensive courses and some of the strategies that are used to engage students. Would that be of interest to you? And is there anything else that you'd like me to cover? Please speak now. 1 o'clock already. Jean-Luc, yes, good.
Hi. Yeah, no, I just thought, well, if there is no more dialogue to occur, I'd love to close off the meeting for us. Then we can proceed with our day. Yeah. Okay.
All right. Okay. Cool. Many thanks, everyone, and see you next Wednesday.
Yes. Thank you, everyone. Next week, Prof. Nichols will be joining us again, and we'll cover writing intensive strategies. And we'll also look at the program overview and aims of writing intensive courses and other concepts such as engagement memory. So please join us next week at 12 o'clock for another session. Thank you, everyone, and have a lovely day.
You too.
Thank you.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Simone.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank
Take
you.
care.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Bye, Stuart.